Okay, we're moving on to Chapter 8, Lesson 2. It's solving basic percentage sentences. On page 534, they give you a nice little chart of how to work with a equation. We're going to do two different things here. We're going to work with an equation, and we're also going to work with proportions. And I'll do both methods for you. The first one, though, I'm going to use is the percent formula. Okay? And you'll notice in your book that it says a part is a percent of a whole, or percent of a whole is a part. There's a couple of words we need to know here. Of and is. Those represent mathematical terms. Of represents multiply, and is represents that it's equal. So if you look at the very top where it says a percent of a whole is a part, a percent, so percent of multiplied by the whole, so percent multiplied by the whole is equals the part. And we can substitute things in there different ways. Now, there is a chart underneath there that talks about how to substitute when you don't know things. And they've rearranged the equation for you. I'm just going to keep this same equation, and we're going to substitute in what we know to find what we don't know. So for each, I'm looking at example 1, and it says, for each basic percent sentence, identify the unknown amount as a percent, whole, or part. We're just going to go through and do a couple of different things here. I'm going to look at example 1, then we're going to do your turn 1. Okay? So it says 30% of what number is 64? I want to tell you one more thing. Of also in percentage problems means the whole number is next. So when you see the word like percent of 35, guess what? 35 is your whole number. Okay? So one other important key for this is your percent has to be in decimal form. So we need to turn 30% of what number is 64. So 30 is our percent, and I change that to a decimal, and it's 30 hundredths times of what number of, I don't know, equals is 64. Okay, now I just have a multiplication equation. So I do the inverse of multiplying, and that's dividing both sides by 30 hundredths. And if you do that on your calculator, you would find that the answer, 30%, I didn't grab the calculator, 30% (64) divided by 30% is about 213 and a third. Okay? All right. Let's move on and do a couple of other situations here. Let's look at your turn. I'm sorry, not your turn, number 1. They're just identifying. Let's look at example 2. And then your turn 2. So example 2 gives you 60% of 40 is what number? Okay? 60% of what number? Oh, of 40, sorry. Equals 64. Okay? So that equals 64 by doing. So then I'm just going to do straight up multiplying. 0.6 times 40, or 60 hundredths, or 60 tenths times 40 equals 24. Okay? Substituting in for the equation. Let's do one more with the equation. Let's look at your turn 2, and then I'll move into the proportion here. Your turn 2 says 30% of 148 is what number? Percent of 148 equals question mark. Okay, straight up multiplying, 3/10 times 48, I think you get 44 and 4/10. Okay, so what does it mean if I set it up as a proportion? Well, let's do this. Let me tell you this. Here is your setup. It's always the percentage over 100 equals the part over the whole. Remember what I said about of. So let's look at your turn number 3. 45% of what number is 95 and 4/10? Okay, what do I know? I know the percent, so 45 over 100 equals, do I know the part or do I know the whole? It says of what number. So what comes after of? What number? I don't know. So that's my question mark. Is 95 and 4/10. And now we have a proportion where we take 100, our cross products, 100 times 95 and 4/10, and then I'm going to divide that by 45. And when you do that, I think you'll find the answer is, question mark, is 212. In this particular case with the proportion, if you get comfortable with solving those, proportions are useful to solve many different types of equations. You don't have to change your percentage to a decimal. Okay? You can just leave it there because we're putting it over 100. Let me do one more. I want to look at example 4, and this time we have to find the percent. So it says, I'm going to do a proportion here. It says, what percent of 240 is 60? Okay, so percent is my question mark because I don't know that, over 100. 100 is always there. It's always going to be something over 100. This is the staple item that will never change. Equals of 240. So that means that's the whole. And you kind of notice that it says is 60. That's the part. So in this case, I'm going to take 100 times 60 and divide it by 240. Remember, you can be using your calculator for these, and I think that you will find that the percent is 25. Okay? All right, that takes care of an introduction to percentages. We're going to look at some specific examples in your last video.